The opening of the mouth ceremony is primarily associated with ancient Egyptian rather than Sumerian culture. However, I can provide some information on both topics. Black magic in ancient Sumer and the opening of the mouth ceremony in ancient Egypt. Before we start, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy our video, please hit the like button. This will help us reach more people and create content for you. Now let's get started with today's video. Black magic in ancient Sumer. Ancient Sumer, one of the earliest civilizations in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, had a rich tradition of magic and supernatural beliefs. Black magic, which is typically defined as the use of supernatural powers for malevolent purposes, played a significant role in Sumerian culture. Sumerian beliefs and practices. Incantations and spells. The Sumerians believed that words held power, and they used incantations and spells to protect themselves, cure illnesses, and bring harm to enemies. These spells were often written on clay tablets and included specific phrases and instructions to invoke supernatural forces. Demonology. The Sumerians had a complex pantheon of gods, spirits, and demons. Malevolent demons were believed to cause diseases, misfortune, and other calamities. To counter these demons, the Sumerians used protective rituals and amulets. Priests and magicians. Special priests and magicians, known as Ashipu and Mashmashu, were responsible for performing magical rituals. They had extensive knowledge of magical texts and practices and were called upon to combat evil forces. Amulets and talismans, to protect themselves from evil spirits and black magic. The Sumerians used amulets and talismans. These objects were inscribed with magical symbols and texts, and they were believed to have protective properties. Rituals and sacrifices. Various rituals and sacrifices were performed to appease the gods and protect against evil influences. These rituals often included offerings of food, animals, and other items to the gods. The opening of the mouth ceremony in ancient Egypt. The opening of the mouth ceremony was a crucial part of ancient Egyptian funerary practices. Although it is not related to Sumerian culture, it offers a comparative understanding of ancient magical practices and beliefs. Purpose and significance. The ceremony aimed to restore the senses of the deceased, ensuring that they could eat, drink, speak, see, hear, and breathe in the afterlife. This was essential for the deceased to enjoy a full existence in the afterlife. Ritual procedure. The ceremony involved several stages, including purification, offerings, and the symbolic opening of the mouth. Priests or family members performed the ritual using special tools such as adzes, blades, and other ceremonial implements. Tools and symbols. The tools used in the ceremony, often made of precious materials, had symbolic significance. The adze, for example, was shaped like a hieroglyph representing life and was used to touch the mouth and other senses of the mummy. Texts and incantations. The ritual was accompanied by specific texts and incantations believed to have magical power. These texts were often inscribed on the walls of tombs or on papyrus scrolls placed with the deceased. Significance in funerary practices. The opening of the mouth ceremony was considered one of the most important rituals in Egyptian funerary practices. It was performed on statues and images of the deceased, as well as on the mummy itself. Biblical perspectives on black magic. The Bible, particularly the Old Testament, addresses the topic of magic and the use of supernatural powers. The biblical stance on magic, especially black magic, is generally negative and condemning. Old Testament views prohibitions against magic. The Old Testament contains several explicit prohibitions against the practice of magic. For example, in Leviticus chapter 19 verse 26, it states, "Do not practice divination or seek omens." Similarly, Deuteronomy chapter 18 verses 10 to 12 warns against various forms of magic. "Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord." Condemnation of sorcery and divination. In the Bible, sorcery and divination are often associated with pagan practices and are condemned as detestable to God. Exodus chapter 22 verse 18 states, "Do not allow a sorceress to live." This harsh stance reflects the belief that such practices were harmful and led people away from the worship of the true God. Saul and the Witch of Endor. One of the most well-known biblical stories involving magic is found in 1 Samuel chapter 28. King Saul, seeking guidance before a battle, consults a medium known as the Witch of Endor. Despite the prohibition against such practices, Saul asks the medium to summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel. This act is depicted negatively, and Saul is ultimately condemned for his actions. Prophets against false practices. The prophets of the Old Testament frequently spoke out against magic and false practices. In Isaiah chapter 8 verse 19, it is written, "When someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists, who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living?" Historical context. Throughout history, various cultures have engaged in practices considered black magic. These often involved rituals, sacrifices, and the invocation of spirits or deities believed to have power over the natural world. Modern context. In contemporary times, people who engage in practices considered black magic may follow specific traditions or create their own rituals. These can involve the use of symbolic objects, chanting, and the performance of specific actions believed to influence supernatural forces. Moral and ethical considerations. Engaging in black magic raises significant moral and ethical questions, as it often involves attempting to control or harm others. It is important to consider the potential consequences of such actions, both for oneself and for others. The Bible's explanation and condemnation of black magic. The Bible explicitly condemns the practice of black magic, sorcery, and other forms of occultism. Here are several key points and passages that illustrate the biblical stance. Old Testament prohibitions against magic. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 26. Do not practice divination or seek omens. Deuteronomy chapter 18 verses 10 to 12. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Consequences for practicing sorcery. Exodus chapter 22 verse 18. Do not allow a sorceress to live. This reflects the severity with which such practices were viewed in ancient Israelite society. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 27. A man or woman who is a medium or spiritist among you must be put to death. You are to stone them, their blood will be on their own heads. Narratives and examples. 1 Samuel chapter 28 verses 7 to 25. The story of King Saul consulting the witch of Endor to summon the spirit of Samuel. This act leads to Saul's downfall and highlights the dangers and divine disapproval of such practices. New Testament Acts of the Apostles. Acts chapter 8 verses 9 to 24. Simon the magician attempts to buy the power of the Holy Spirit. Peter rebukes him, emphasizing that the gifts of God cannot be purchased or manipulated through magic. Acts chapter 13 verses 6 to 12. Elymas the sorcerer opposes Paul and Barnabas and is struck blind by Paul, demonstrating the power of God over sorcery. Condemnation of sorcery. Galatians chapter 5 verses 19 to 21. Paul lists sorcery as one of the acts of the flesh that are contrary to the Spirit of God. Revelation chapter 21 verse 8. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. Teachings of Jesus and the Apostles. Jesus and the Apostles consistently emphasized faith, prayer, and reliance on God rather than on magical practices. For instance, in the Lord's Prayer, Matthew chapter 6 verses 9 to 13, Jesus teaches his followers to seek God's will and protection rather than turning to supernatural forces. Conclusion. The Bible unequivocally condemns black magic and other forms of occultism, viewing them as practices that lead people away from God and towards harmful and destructive behaviors. It emphasizes the importance of relying on God, following His commandments, and avoiding practices that seek to manipulate or control supernatural forces for personal gain or harm to others. The practice of black magic in ancient Sumer and the opening of the mouth ceremony in ancient Egypt offer insights into the rich tapestry of ancient beliefs and rituals. While the Sumerians used magic to protect themselves and combat evil forces, the Egyptians performed elaborate rituals to ensure the well-being of the deceased in the afterlife. In contrast, the Bible takes a firm stance against the practice of magic, particularly black magic, viewing it as an abomination and a deviation from the worship of the true God. Through various passages and stories, the Bible consistently condemns magic and sorcery, emphasizing the importance of faith in God over reliance on supernatural practices. This perspective highlights the stark differences between the ancient Near Eastern practices and the biblical worldview, underscoring the distinct spiritual and moral framework of the Judeo-Christian tradition. For those interested in spiritual guidance and understanding, the Bible offers a path centered on faith, prayer, and a relationship with God. It warns against the dangers of black magic and provides clear instructions to avoid such practices, emphasizing the importance of living a life that aligns with divine principles and values. Please subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.